So this is a bit of background about me. I think some of you know who I am, others I'm new to. But I've basically been in the change management arena for probably 35 plus years now. I spent 17, 18 years in a big global business. I got involved in massive amounts of change, particularly towards the end, global projects, local projects. And then in 1995, I founded Change First. And we spent the last 25 years helping organizations build their change management capabilities. That's basically what we've done. We've worked with hundreds of organizations, tens of thousands of users. And our goal always has been to try and get our materials to as many people as possible, to make them accessible as possible. I've written a couple of books. I wrote a book called Successful Change, which did extremely well. And then I co-wrote a book with my CEO here, Audra Proctor, which is called Enterprise Change Management, which was published by Kogan Page. And I spent a lot of I used to spend a lot of my life advising really change leaders on implementing strategic disruptive change, auditing change programs, etc. So, I've done a lot around the change management space for a lot of years now. And what I want to try and do in this presentation is to really sort of talk about what I've learned from and what we've learned from all the disruption we've ever seen. I mean, this is probably the biggest crisis we've seen for probably all our lifetimes. Nothing quite as all-encompassing as this has happened to us, but we do have references back to crises that have impacted our organizations and our families and our societies, whether that's, the financial crash of a decade ago comes to mind, and small things we've seen over the years, whether it was smaller in the sense of their impact on the economy in our lives, like 9/11 or the dot-com crash. The economy has crashed a number of times, but never probably quite as severe as this. So what I want to talk about today, firstly, is just really talk about I'm going to actually have a couple of slides just to sort of set the scene, because I think there's a really important change management issue that needs to be addressed in our organizations before we can move forward. But once I've done that, I want to talk about the key dimensions that are going to need to be managed when we manage the responses to things like COVID-19. I'm going to talk a little bit about working from home. There are literally millions of references now on Google on working from home, so I'm not going to take through some of the kind of basic stuff, but I'd really like to talk about some of the psychology of that and how, as change leaders, we can really help people manage themselves during this. And then lastly, what I want to do is talk a little bit about getting your teams back to usual, and then I'm going to finish off with just 2 or 3 things that I've learned over 35 years that I always find helpful, and I always find that other people find helpful. So, I've advised change leaders through a number of crises over the years, and I think there's some basic principles that always seem to come back, but I just want to talk about those. Basically, as change leaders, COVID-19 has really created 3 levels of change for us to manage. There's personal change, which we are all suffering from. I'm sitting at home here in my study doing this webinar. Normally I'd have someone to make sure that they were running the technology. They'd be sitting quite close to me, probably have somebody else helping as well. But now here I am doing it all. So, there's a degree of personal change there. I've had to read a load of instructions. I've had to practice, all those kind of things. But my observation so far is that, of course, for some people, one of the interesting things I think from a change management perspective is that there are some people who this change is obviously devastating. People who are seriously ill, people dying, people's relatives are dying, people are losing their jobs. At another level, at the other end of that continuum, there are people reporting back quite positive things about the changes that COVID has caused. It's not that they think positively about COVID. And for example, there was a survey in the UK last week which showed that 65% of people said they're getting a lot more sleep because of the, being self-isolated and lockdown. And I think over 50% of people reported that they were spending a lot more quality time with their children, whereas they expected to be on computer games all day and watching television. That's not always turned out to be the case. So And that is it's usual in any change management. So always the personal changes that are going on that are impacting our people are always going to be a kind of melange of different behaviours and reactions. The second level of change that's going on is obviously our organisations, mine included, are responding to these events. I mean, we are forced to make some changes. Well, that's the example I give here is working from home. We are turning a lot of our workshops into virtual workshops, like lots of other people are, just trying to get into the virtual. And then the third thing I think that we're seeing quite clearly is organisations will need to and are beginning to act proactively. So it's not really a case of just reacting to events. They're using this as a trigger to expedite things they wanted to do already. So, for example, I had a conversation this morning with a managing partner of a big global consulting firm, and of course the point he was making was, look, we were going to do this, but now this is our opportunity to accelerate and move into digital and digital applications that we've always intended to do, and we are partially in, but we need to change our strategy. We need to accelerate our own digital transformation strategy. So I think we're seeing these three levels, and of course the struggle for all of us is trying to pick this apart in a sense of to be able to manage all these changes in our organisation. Because if we're responsible for the overall change agenda in an organisation, or we're advising someone that is, we've got to take all three of these into account. We've got to be having programs and plans which help people with personal change, which help them respond to events, which then we pick up the key initiatives and we proactively move forward. We have to do all those things. If I'm on a program, I've got to take into account that I was going to do this program, and the people that we're going to have to change have got a whole load of other changes on board as well. So there's just kind of multiple different kinds of impacts on this. So what our data would suggest, and I think I'm going to just kind of try and make a sort of important point out this in a second, just by picking this data apart a bit. But we have a tool called Change Demand Assessment that does what it says. It allows people to we get input on the amount of change demand that people are seeing. And what we're seeing from the data is that already, when we did this, we collected all the data together. What we saw in 2018 was that a majority of people felt they were overwhelmed by change already. So what you have in organisations, and this has gone on for a lot of years when we collect this data, every time we go into our Roadmap Pro database and we look at it, what we find is that this kind of statistic here that people feel overwhelmed comes about. So the issue already is before all this personal change that was put on people were already feeling overwhelmed. And I think that the point I was trying to make earlier is that we not only have to take into account the fact that people have a level of work-generated change, but they also have a level of personal generated change. What that means is that they can probably assimilate less change than they could have done 6 months ago. So they're already feeling overwhelmed by the amount of changes in their lives, and now that's just been piled on. That's been ratcheted up, leveraged up to a much, much higher level. And so as an organization, if we have the power to do this, what we have to do is two things. We either have to try and do both or one of these quite well. One thing is we're probably going to have to lower the demand for change in our organization, which means that we have to help our executives to get much, much more focused on what are the really key initiatives that are going to be possible to be delivered. It doesn't matter what our strategy is, and we should deliver all these things, theoretically. What do we actually have the capacity for to deliver? And then that means that we must get really focused. And I've noticed that in a number of conversations I've had with clients and prospective clients over the last couple of weeks, is people are really trying to choose the initiatives they can deliver and to deliver them extremely well. At the same time, we've got to try and increase the capacity of the organization. So we can increase the capacity of the organization by helping people to be more resilient, by making sure our leaders are much more efficient, by making sure the programs we run, we do that with the right tools and the right technology to get them done. So we have to do one of those two things. So that said, given the time we have, what I want to focus down now is at the project level. So there's one issue, which is how do we manage the overall change agenda, the overall change load in our organizations? It's the second thing then to say, as part of that, what is it that we can do within what has to be done to make our projects more effective? This is a cartoon from a guy called Tom Fishburne that I like a lot. It gets sent through emails every couple of weeks by him, and he's kind of making the point here that everything's in flux. We people are really undecided about which projects to pursue. They decide to go ahead, then they're stopping, and people are trying to figure all this out currently. So what we've identified, and I'm going to apply this to a COVID example on the next slide, and some of you know this, we've identified that successful change programs have 6 critical success factors. So I'm just going to quickly go through them. What we did in our research about 20 years ago, and which we keep updated, is we try and monitor each of these 6 critical success factors to see if they're still relevant and see if they still work effectively in organizations, and they seem to. So the first one is shared change purpose. Shared change purpose is really about, do we have a clear vision for the change, and do we really know, do we have a clear understanding of the fact that we cannot stay where we are? So it's a combination of 3 things. One is, do we know where we're going? Secondly, do we know why we can't stay where we are? And the third thing is how we bridge those 2 things. How do we bridge? What is the solution that will take us from not being able to stay where we are to where we need to go? Second one is effective change leadership, particularly at the executive level and the senior leadership level. Are sponsors doing the things that are needed to be done in order to get the change done? And I'll talk very briefly about that in a second. But that also includes, and I think this is growing, and you're going to see this in a bit of data in a moment, that includes informal influencers. What is the extent to which people who have informal influence in the organization, what is the power that, are we able to get people with informal influence behind the change? Are we able to get them to support what needs to be done? The third one is powerful engagement processes. What we mean by that is, do we have plans which cover involvement, education, learning, and rewards, which are going to get the job done, going to get the program done? And those 3 form the package of what we would normally regard as change management planning. Then the issue is, well, once we have a plan and we have some leadership support, we have all the other things in place, how do we deploy that? Because what we found in our research years ago, and still is the case, is that it's one thing to write a plan, it's another thing to deploy it. And if we put plans into groups further down the organization who are unprepared or unable to lead that plan, then for sure failure will follow. And so what we had, 3 other success factors. Have we managed to get our team leaders committed to the plan, committed to the change, and do they have the skills and the willpower to execute on that? 5th one is, given that we have got those people in place and they are supporting this change and they are able to drive it, are they able to take the goals of the change, the shared change purpose of the change, and are they able to take those and help build commitment amongst their teams? So once they are committed, in a sense, the team leaders, the local sponsors, how do we ensure and support that they do the same to their people? Sustained personal performance is our realization that it doesn't really matter how great a change plan is, doesn't matter how marvelous the change is, there will always be people that resist it. And if we look at what's happened in society with COVID, that was really interesting, because you're just seeing exactly that, aren't you? There's a pretty committed portion of the population who are by and large, with a lot of common sense, adhering to the rules of lockdown, social distancing, self-isolation. But then you'll see a group of very small group of people, certainly where I live around here, who are just resisting that. And they have all sorts of reasons for resisting that, but nevertheless it's resistance. And some of those people need some help with that. So if you take it back to organizational context, those people would need some help. So let's just run that through. So the model is pretty applicable. We've seen it applicable to all hundreds of different sorts of changes over the years. Obviously change programs differ in the content of them. Are we restructuring, or are we implementing technology? Are we doing a merger? Are we implementing employee programs like working from home? But actually the mechanics of them are largely the same. It's just how you would use those mechanics. I've just had an annotation request. I'm going to decline it because it actually throws my slides out for a bit. So I'm really sorry about that. So I'm just going to take that away. Well, we will send a copy of the slides after the meeting. Shared change purpose. So if I run down the six again, and I look at the example of working from home, um, let me just take you through those. So shared change purpose. So if we were looking at a working from home project with an organisation, one of the key questions there would be, do people clearly understand what is required from them when they work from home? So when I'm working from home as my leader, my boss, my manager, people that are heading up the organisation, they're being very clear about what their expectations are of working hours, of output, of communication, of what good looks like, etc. If we had effective change leadership, I'm going to come back to this very quickly, but are leaders role modeling working from home and any associated practices like flexible working? So, I was talking to someone from an organisation, actually a friend of mine yesterday, who's in a business, and his boss is insisting that once a week, everybody, the 10 people in the executive team have a face-to-face meeting because it's really important that we kind of stay in touch with each other. And of course, it's beginning to make him and then the people that work for him quite nervous about what really is the commitment from working from home. So this whole idea of role modeling is incredibly important, and that's why obviously effective change and that's how effective change leadership is deployed. Powerful engagement processes. A good example would be our leaders engaged in two-way dialogue. Are we actually, rather than talking at people, are we actually talking with people and trying to get them on board? Is there some way that we can involve people more in working from home and setting the terms for that, setting the conditions for that, setting the working practices for that? Because one of the things we know is that if people are involved in those kind of issues, they're more likely, not totally certain, but more likely to be committed to the outcomes of that. In our organisations, have we given our team leaders, the people that actually manage them, people on the front line, the people that are working from home, have we given them the support and the skills they need in order to support their teams? Same with personal connection. Once that's in place, are we giving the people who are actually working from home the right skills and tools to do that? I mean, if you take my organisation, our organisation here, we've had people working. Well, we've had a virtual network of people sort of centering around our headquarters for many years now. But now we're all working from home, and one of the things that we're having to sort out, for example, is just protocols. So what we're having to, people are talking about, and people have said that to me, that my protocols are not so great sometimes. And so what you have to do is to kind of give people the skills and tools to make sure this is successful. Someone's not on mute somewhere, I think. Sounds like they're making a cup of tea, actually, or a cup of coffee. Sustained personal performance. People are being helped by the manager to adapt to the change. So, what working from home is throwing up already, isn't it? Is all sorts of issues about how, particularly, for example, people with young children. How do they manage their working hours? How with their partner or spouse or friend? How do they share, childcare duties, home education duties, all that kind of stuff? How does that actually happen? And how, as organisations, how do we help people work that through? Is it okay for someone to work in the evening rather than during the afternoon? Because in the afternoon they're giving home education to their 7-year-old. Is that okay? And are we giving our blessing to that, or are we really trying to help them do that by whatever? Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about really, therefore, was a model by which that we should apply to all these programs, and this was one example. Okay, if you look at our data, I'm just going to dive down a bit here. We collect, a lot of you will know this, we collect a lot of data. I think last time I spent any time looking at this, which was about 2 years ago, I think we have one of the largest change management actual databases in the world. We may have the second, I think. And so we have a lot of data on change because we've had online tools for probably close to 12 years now. So our diagnostics have been here for about 12 years. And what our data shows is on the left. This was probably collected about a year ago. What the light blue writing shows, the light blue labels, are those with the highest risk. So when you take out our 6 critical success factors, you can break them down into 20 risk factors, so that you can monitor those risk factors throughout the change. You can use those to track. Interestingly, I think just talk about this in terms of large scale programs like working from home or any kind of change, implementing technology, whatever it might be. There's some 5 really quite consistent risks, sub-risks that come to that. One is that we don't often reward people. We've done lots of surveys in organizations, which include, focus groups. One of the most common comments you get is that we don't get rewarded for changing. In fact, what happens is the people that reward last, the people that change last, sort of paradoxically get the most rewards, or get the same rewards as those that change first. So rewards within, and recognition. So if we think about recognition, how do we recognize people who are working from home effectively? How do we give those people feedback in front of other people that, gives them some sort of reward for that? So I think looking at rewards and recognition is important. Are we involving people? The second biggest risk in our database is people don't feel involved. And there's 2 ways you can involve people. You can involve people in the design of the change, which is not always possible. But we can attempt that, or we can involve people in the actual implementation of the change. How do we design the implementation to make this really effective? Constant feedback in the databases, I don't feel very involved or engaged. Informal influence, I mentioned this earlier on. What is the extent to which that people who have low levels of formal power but high levels of informal power in the organisation, to what extent are those people positively inclined towards the change? Now, what our database is saying is that organisations don't always do a good job of getting people with informal influence to support the changes they want to happen. So what you do is the reverse side of that is you build a kind of guerrilla network that is trying to actively stop the change. So you have a lot of formal power, the executives, senior managers, some of the key players in the organisation are supporting the change, but there's a whole network, an underground network of people who are saying, no, you don't really want to do that. No, that technology is not good. Haven't you read the reviews in ZNet or whatever it's called about that change? It will constantly undermine it. And I think one of the things that's really important as we move through COVID-19, and we will move through it, is that we harness the power of people having formal influence. Local role modeling, people, you can read it as well as I can, people see that their line managers are not actively demonstrating the new behaviours. These behaviours are just for you guys, not for me. And solution visibility is when people withhold their support because they're not actually clear what's required. And people don't like going from A to B. Generally, people don't like going to A to B. I'll make a caveat in a second. People don't like going to A to B unless they know how they're going to get from A to B. They're just not, it's a bit like you moving house, going home and telling your partner or your parents or whatever that we need to move house. But I'm not really quite, and we're going to sell this house, but I'm not sure where we're going to move to. Interestingly, of course, if your imperative, what used to be called the burning platform, is really strong, then people are more inclined to move in if they're uncertain about the future, which is what we're seeing now. We're seeing that people are being told in the short term to lock down, but actually the future is uncertain. But the imperative, the feelings that people have that they don't want to catch COVID-19 are so strong, and their adherence to what's being said to them is so strong that they are willing to move. But that is pretty rare in most organisations. So in most organisations, you need us to be able to tell people about the solution as well as about the vision and why we can't stay where we are. So keeping going with the trend of working from home, there's a lot of advice being given to people about successfully working from home. If you think, I found this yesterday, or a couple of days when I put this together. Is that something like, I can't even read it, is that something like 3.7 trillion? Is that there's about 3.7 trillion results or something? I mean, there is so much stuff on the web about working from home. So I'm not really going to take you through the 5 ways to work well from home, the 7 attributes, I don't know. I'm not going to take you through the where's and why's for the Zoom or any of that kind of stuff. But what I want to do is talk about it through the lens that we see, that's powerful and some value add I think we have to add to this. So I'm just going to briefly talk about something called resilience. Most of you know what it is, but I want to actually put that into practical effect in a second. So I'm going to try a poll in a minute. So let's see how that works out. Bear in mind that I have to set it up, so that's probably not a great thing for a technology. So resilience is something that we've been really interested in for about 20 years now, perhaps even more than that. Because what we're really interested in is resilience is the ability of people to bounce back from major disruption effectively. And that's not that people who are resilient, it's not that they are, they don't go through change or they don't suffer the effects of change. What it says is that they're more able to adapt more quickly than other people. In fact, they may even thrive because of the uncertainty of change and the disruption that change causes and the pain that change causes to them. They may even thrive out of that rather than simply just bouncing along. So resilience is an important thing. So what we did for some years ago, and we have a tool around this, is that we identified 7 kind of characteristics of resilient people, and we have a preference questionnaire which describes not whether you're good or bad at something, but what do you prefer to use. And I'm going to try and get you to look at 7 questions in a second in a very, very quick poll, given the time we've got. So what we identified was 7 characteristics. I'll quickly go through these 7 characteristics. And I think what's interesting is you can apply this checklist to individuals, to people, and you can apply it to organizations. And I think one of the interesting things about this list is if you, as a change leader, which everybody on this call is, if I'm looking at a group of people or individuals that are not doing very well through this, through the kind of effects of COVID-19, through the effects of being furloughed, through the effects of working from home, through the effects of self-isolation, you have a tool that maybe can help them. A tool that by looking at these 7 characteristics on this checklist, you can identify which of these, if they did more of this one, would that help them more? And so I'm going to take you quickly through them. So the first one is optimistic. People who are optimistic believe that changes will have positive outcomes. And they tend to interpret situations like COVID-19 in a way that gives hope for the future. Now, just a quick caveat about optimistic, and that is that you can have too much optimism. I've had a bit more time. I've got quite a few stories of people being too optimistic. But you can imagine if you're not realistically optimistic, then you're going to jump into all sorts of situations that are going to hurt you, and you're not going to have the skills or the resources to maneuver. So optimism is really important up to a point. Same with self-assured. People who are optimistic, people who are resilient, tend to be quite self-assured. They have a strong but realistic belief in their own abilities. And they try to control change rather than letting change control you, which, as we saw from the first slide, in certain situations we're in right now is quite tough. But it's about the way in which I interact with the way in the world, the way in which I identify opportunities to control the change. Resilient people tend to be more focused than people with lower resilience. You could summarize that quite quickly by saying they tend to set goals or have goals, and they're not easily diverted from them. And it's one of the things, as uncertainty wells around and all the disruption that wells around, it's very easy to find yourself jumping from one plan to another plan, from one way of dealing things to another way of dealing things. And people who are resilient don't do that so much. It's not that they never do it, but they don't do it so much. They're also open to ideas. What we're faced with now. I mean, one of the interesting things when I was talking to a client yesterday, and he said what he's observing as he talks to people, is that people are being more innovative than he's ever seen before. That the situation has forced people into using all sorts of technologies, working practices, rejigging their products in record time, and people are trying to be very, very innovative, and we're seeing that in the responses of our governments, or many of our governments. Many of them are trying to be more innovative than we've ever seen before. If you're a UK citizen like me, what you're seeing is a conservative government who are really introducing programs that are incredibly the opposite of what their natural philosophies would be normally. And they're having to do it because they're having to be innovative. And what the good thing we're seeing is that people are being very open to ideas. Now, people with low resilience are not so open. Seek support. What we've identified about highly resilient people is that that they seek the support of other people in the organisation or other people in their social group in order to in order to work their way through the change. So and in a sense, that's quite a selfish emotion. It doesn't mean that they are teaming with somebody, sharing with somebody. What it means is that they have a group of people who they're able to go to and get support. Structured is about analysing situations and able to create a plan for change. People with low resilience tend to be very unstructured. So you'll say to them, "What do you want to, what do you want to do next year?" They say, "I'd like to be X." Then you say, "Well, okay, what are the steps to become X?" And they don't know. Or they'll say something like, "Well, I'll just, no, it will happen. Don't you worry, it will just happen." Well, of course, it never does happen. So you see them a year later, and of course, it's never happened. Structure is very important in change and much underrated. Everybody thinks it's some kind of spontaneous thing that you just go and do. But what we know, most of us on this call, from our work in organizations, is that structures work, methodologies work, processes work, tools help us get there. And the last one is proactive, which is that people are prepared to step into the unknown. Some of us just have a higher risk tolerance than others, but for low resilient people, their risk intolerance is so high that often they just can't take the steps to change and therefore never change. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and open a poll. And what I want you to do, if you could just do one thing more. So I'm going to give you the 7 characteristics. I want you to select one that if you could do more of that, it would help you go through the change. Interestingly. So if I look down the 7 questions, you believe that change will have positive outcomes. 7 people responded to that. You have a strong but realistic belief in your own abilities. 10. Focused. 5 people said if they were more focused. 14 people said that they are open to ideas, would be the thing they would most like to improve. 11 people said seek support. Structured. Only 4 people said they could be more structured. And 9 people said they could be more proactive. So by far, not by far, but the 2 most interesting, the 2 most common ones are people saying about being open to ideas. That's the biggest one, that people would like to be more open to ideas, be more open-minded about different ways to deal with challenges. And so I think, and that links to the next one, which is seek support. People think they should spend more time, put more effort into seeking support of others in change situations. And of course, those are two really related ideas, aren't they? They're, if I go talk to people more, seek them more, support people, I'm going to get more ideas. So I think those 2. So that's interesting, and it's pretty much up in pattern with what we tend to see in organisations. Is that people are. I think the thing that I see most is that people, when they come under pressure in change, are more unwilling to open their minds up and seek ideas, because what we tend to do is get very focused. What we tend to do is to kind of narrow down our options. We tend to do what's been done before, what feels comfortable. We feel uncomfortable, particularly in organisations, often going asking people that we don't know terribly well for support. And what happens, of course, is that we just try and repeat the mistakes that we've made before, or sometimes repeat the successes. So what a calamity like COVID-19 shows us is that we really do need to kind of open our mind more. So quick reflections on leadership. I think one of the most interesting things that we've seen in the UK, and I think we've also seen it in the States and some other countries, really, really clear examples of what not to do in leadership. Probably the most important thing we could help our leaders with, if we want our changes to be successful, and any change to be successful, is to not talk about the change so much as do it. And what I put up here is, in Scotland, the chief medical officer, who was responsible for going on television telling everybody not to travel, not to do unnecessary trips, not to go to any second homes they may have, but stay in their primary housing, was then the following week, 2 weekends, found in a holiday home. And of course, it totally destroyed her credibility, and it destroyed, it damaged the program for a while. Fortunately, and it left really the Scottish government with no choice but to dismiss her in order to retain any credibility for this program. And you see this time coming. And I think if we look at what's happening in our organisations, what we need to do is to encourage people, leaders, to support and do things. We are really geared up for virtual working, but if you're interested, come to our website. We've got a lot of products and services that support home working and virtual collaboration, which we have not just invented, but we've been working on for a decade or so now. And in particular, our Roadmap Pro platform is available to individuals and available to organizations, and it allows you to collaborate, to share, and to build really robust plans, whether that's on a global basis, a country basis, or a city basis. In the pack, there's some information on Roadmap Pro. It's a comprehensive package. It's got a whole load of diagnostics in it. It's got a whole load of dashboarding in it. It's got ability to build pre-populated change actions, and it's also full of training about how to do techniques and video training on different techniques and different processes. Okay, I'm going to make two final points. This is another cartoon I quite liked. Organizations for years often talk about change, don't they? And we don't have to change very soon. And change is not going to happen to us, etc., etc. And even when we enter into digital transformation, it's slow, or it's piecemeal, or all those kind of things. And this is a time when this is kind of, for my interest as someone who's tried to promote the change management profession for 3 decades now. I think this is the time when change management can really make a difference for your family, society, and organizations. If there's ever been a skill set that's more suited to helping people in this current environment, I really don't know what it is really, other than other than the basics of medical and emergency and all those really important things. But from a kind of professional, non-medical, non-kind of public service basis, we have the skills to help our families and our societies and our individuals. And change is going to be here now in a massive way for the next 2 or 3, 5 years. I don't know how long, maybe another decade before we're back to normal again. And so I think that's really important. And I wanted to just kind of leave with 4 things I've learned from all this disruptive change over the years. And I'll quickly run through them. And if anybody wants to email me, I'm quite happy to expand on them. But these 4 have pretty much stood me in great stead for 30 years. And every time that I work with a leader or an executive or somebody around the world, and they embrace these, I think it seems to be really powerful and helpful to them. One is don't let the size of the challenge faze you. The principles are the same. So it doesn't really matter how big the challenge is. The principles remain the same. I've managed huge global disruptive changes, responses to different events, and I've managed tiny changes affecting 30 people. The principles are the same. The leverage you have to apply, the size of them, the process, the steps differ. But always remember the principles and step back and think about what are the principles that are going on here. Second thing I've learned is always have enough time. People in the organization want to rush you into changing something, but you always have enough time. That doesn't mean you shouldn't work at pace and communicate what you're doing, but take your time to get the plan right and execute on the plan. There's an old thing which is plan long, act quick. I was taught this about 30 years ago. Someone said to me, plan long, act quick. They were right. So to spend enough time putting the plan into place, thinking about it, I don't mean be tardy and slow, but take your time and get it right. Third thing I would note, and this is something that we've worked on for a long time now, that's why we have so much data, is in times of high uncertainty and ambiguity and disruption, you need data. You need to go and collect data. And as we said at the beginning, everybody is going to be feeling differently about this change. Some people will say, I'm in lockdown and I'm really happy. I personally am one of those. It's been really helpful to me to spend 3 or 4 weeks here, not chasing around, not going to meetings, not doing that. And it's been incredibly, but for other people, it's just incredibly disruptive in a negative way. We don't know. So we need data, and we need that because we need to manage our sponsors, our executives. It's the one thing that keeps them happy. It's the one thing that makes them comfortable is data, not our anecdotal feelings. The last one um, is maintain, try, well, not try.
Everybody can just make their own shit.
So the last one is to maintain your integrity and personal values. Amongst all the daily noise, they can be really easy to lose. So think about, what are my values? What is it I have to get done? And how am I going to do it in a way that makes me feel good afterwards? And so I'm about my finish there. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions via chat. I'll pick those up now.
Just make teams.
Um,
Everybody just make their own.
if you're interested in demos of our roadmap pro, the joys of home and find about our online change identification course. Let me have a look at the chat. Okay, somebody asked me, what is the age of this data, which was the data which is taken from our legacy database. So the data is, actually the slide I showed you is about a year old. If you're interested, drop me an email and I'll send you an updated version of the data. I'll show you on our Roadmap Pro information. It is pretty globally relevant. Certainly from what looked by in your location, we have data. It's cut across many industries. Very happy to send you a kind of some of the information on that. Okay, I found you could use more of challenging to. Someone found the resilience questionnaire challenging to answer. I expect that you'd ask us to put yourselves on a scale. We normally would, to be honest, but it's not that easy to do on WebEx, which is what we're using already, the applications. But so yeah, it normally would. I was just really trying to sort of just get a quick feel about it and get you a chance to think about it and take something from that. The major thing about when we have our questionnaire, and once again, the person asking the question, if you'd like to email me, I'll set the actual survey up for you. You can do it if you would like. Is that it's a preference questionnaire, so it doesn't put you on a norm. It's not a normative questionnaire. What it says is it gets you to assess what is your preferences, and then it says, well, if you have a high preference versus a low preference. If I have a low preference, could I use more of that? If I have a high preference, is that good for the change situations I'm facing, or actually am I'm overusing that? So it really generates a discussion, and we've used it for a lot of workshops over the years, and with different clients have purchased it because it generates a discussion not about am I good or bad at this, but rather more about am I doing enough of it, or too much of it, or too little of it? And if I am doing too much or too little, what could I do about that? And we've got quite a lot of information about what to do about that. And I was kind of just gazing along this afternoon. So if you have an interest, email me and I'll send you some more stuff. Okay, we're living with a moving target for the peak of the COVID-19 crisis. How to keep your and your collaborators resilient with a moving target to end social distancing? That's a great question. It's a question that better brains than me, I think, are spending a lot of time. A lot of scientists are trying to work that out. I think that, yeah. So if I was the person who asked that, please just drop me a line, drop me an email, david.miller@changefirst.com. So anybody of these questions would like more substance. One of my learnings through kind of really disruptive change, and change which for many people has a negative consequence, is that you have to keep people with very short horizons. So, for example, when I was involved with closing businesses, which is really not a highlight in my career, or closing departments, one of the things that I learned to do really how to keep I think in terms of keeping resilience, can I keep people, so we get back to focus as one of the characteristics. Can I keep people very focused? If I think about in the short term, okay, so I think in terms of keeping resilience, keep them on very short-term targets, set up groups where people can meet together and collaborate, etc. So final questions. Improving workers' resilience and leading by doing, not only talking, would it be the main strategy of COVID-19 through the perspective of change management? I think it would be one of the strategies. I mean, whenever I work with leaders, my conversation is always about, well, you're great communicators, because many of them often are actually quite good communicators. They've been through all the training as they've moved up through the organisation. But I think it's all about getting to do things. If I go back to the success factors. Go back to the 6 critical success factors. Have we got have the people who are going through COVID, have we got a clear shared change purpose here? Have we got a clear engagement strategy? Are our team leaders got the skills and abilities and willingness to support this? Are we making messaging local so that we are supporting people? So that if you go back to the critical success factors, which if you don't know them, as I say, drop me an email, I'll send you more information on them. I think it's the combination really of the 6 which give you your strategy. My experience is they all fall apart if we don't have leaders who do things and are seen to be doing the change. Is there a free document available that takes a deeper dive into 6 critical success factors? There is. There should be something on our website. But if not, drop me an email, david.miller@changefirst.com. Although change is universal, geographically and culturally different. Okay, based on your data collected over the years, are there any other tips for LA countries to manage change, for Latin American countries to manage change? Let me take, if you could just drop me an email, I would drop you a note, but I would also like to kind of connect you to our people that work in Latin America, and so that we can kind of give a slightly more rounded argument of that. My experience of working in Latin America, so if you take, say, Northern Europe versus Latin America, I think I would notice about Latin America, for example, is that people need to socialize the change more. So discussion is really quite important to people. Yeah, so that would be one example. But drop me a note and I'll give you a more considered answer to that if you don't mind. Someone's asked me, can we share something with the 6 critical success factors, something I can share with my meditation? Yeah, I mean, what I think I'll do is I will get the marketing team to send some information on the 6 critical success factors out with the slide pack. Thank you, everybody. There was a lot of questions there, and I think one of the things that's interested me is how interested people were in the critical success factors and actually in resilience. So I think that's probably given us all a prompt to think about what we want to do about that. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Please keep safe and keep well. Thank you.